Well, you know the music, and you know that I must have a guest in here. I am very tickled this morning. I have three guests with me. One is a good friend whose name is Dr. Joseph Galloy, and he is with the Illinois State Archaeological Survey. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning, Kathy.
I'm going to take the liberty and call you Joe if you don't mind.
Oh, that's fine.
He'll come to most anything, right?
That's right.
That's right. And then also with me, I have Miranda Yancey-Bailey, also from the Illinois State Archaeological Survey and UIUC. Good morning, Miranda.
Good morning.
It's so nice to have you with us.
It's very nice to be here.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask you when you're speaking, Miranda, to just speak up just a little bit more. And then we also are in the presence of greatness here with His Honor Nathaniel O'Bannon III, who's a former mayor of Brooklyn, Illinois. Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Doing great, thank you. It's lovely to have you with us this morning.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. And indeed, I believe I'm going to enjoy being here to speak on behalf of Brooklyn.
I'm glad that you're here because I think you'll bring a unique perspective to our discussion this morning. Now, in case you all have never heard, you all being my listeners, I lived in Virginia a long time, so that you all will come out of my mouth more often than not. Brooklyn is a small community outside of St. Louis, per se, and would you maybe give us a reference, Joe, as to where it is and what you've been doing here and so forth? This is a fascinating dig.
Sure. Yeah, Brooklyn is a small town, several hundred people, located about a mile north of East St. Louis. If any of you are familiar with the new bridge that was just constructed over the Mississippi, the Stan Musial Veterans Memorial Bridge, that bridge lands just to the south of Brooklyn and in the area north of the National City Stockyards. In fact, the Stockyards was one of the main sources of employment for Brooklyn for many years. So any of you who are familiar with that general part of the Metro East area, that's where Brooklyn is located. We, at the University of Illinois, that is, started to become involved with Brooklyn in a partnership with the town, represented by the mayor's office, and also a new historical society called the Historical Society of Brooklyn, Illinois. Back in 2007, it began from really a chance encounter that I had, my archaeological team had, with Roberta Foster, who is a former resident of Brooklyn and one of the key people in the Historical Society today, when we were digging just east of Brooklyn in the one of the old rail yards. Mm-hmm. And we were digging a prehistoric site of great significance, and she became very excited about the fact that Brooklyn had this ancient site, ancient American Indian site that was located within the city limits, or the village limits, and thought, I wonder what else Brooklyn has, historically speaking. So she started doing her research, and like many of us, we're generally unaware of the history of the places that we live in or that we grew up in, and she discovered that Brooklyn was the oldest incorporated majority black community in the United States.
My goodness.
So with that great sort of piece of information, she started doing more digging, started to bring together a variety of people from the community to form the Historical Society of Brooklyn, and then enlisted our help, the University of Illinois, to start to do some archaeological work in the town.
That is, what an interesting thing, and I did not realize that this had started with Native American artifacts and then this discovery of Brooklyn.
Right.
What an interesting job you have. Truly. What a thrill and how exciting. Like you said, we can live somewhere for the longest time and not even have any idea of what's under our feet.
Exactly.
Literally. So then how did Miranda get involved in this? Miranda? How did you come to be part of this project?
Well, I was working at ISAS whenever the project began, and I just sort of got involved right away, doing with a lot of historical research, going through deed records, and later on through other court records and the like. Basically compiling a historic record for the town and some of the major players in the town's early history, like Priscilla Baltimore and Nicholas Carper and definitely William Paul Quinn, who was a traveling minister for the AME Church, and it's in Brooklyn, in Priscilla Baltimore's home, where it's believed to have been the first AME church in Illinois. And Priscilla later went on to St. Louis, and she helped found the St. Paul's AME Church in St. Louis, which was the first AME west of the Mississippi. But basically, I got involved right away and enjoyed doing the historic research. And then once we got involved with the people in the town, that's just been the best part of everything, being able to work with the community and really being able to make a difference. You don't get to do that too much in archaeology. You get so focused on artifacts and interpretation, but to really be out there with a community who's still around,
Absolutely.
It's wonderful.
And of course, now this brings us to the mayor, who's one of the people.
Yes, very important.
And Mayor O'Bannon, tell us about your perspective of this. How has this impacted the town? Because Miranda was saying, that it's nice to make a difference as an archaeologist instead of just dealing with the artifacts. How has this impacted?
This impacted the town very well. I came in office in 2005.
Yeah, there you go.
I came in office in 2005, and we took the interest of looking up the history of Brooklyn because we felt as though it meant a lot to us. We didn't know it as growing up.
No.
We were told some stories, but I'm glad that she took the initiative to search it out. And it's a wonderful thing to really be a part of history throughout America.
Well, it is, and excuse me, again, the significance is that this is the oldest incorporated African-American town, yes?
Yes.
In
That's correct.
The country that we know of.
Brooklyn started in somewhere around 1830 or so. There are oral traditions, and then there are also historical documents, and they don't necessarily completely agree with each other. Sometimes it's hard to reconcile those things because there are gaps in the historical record. But we know that early in the 19th century, there were several African-American families, most of them from Missouri, who settled part of Brooklyn, which today is called Upper Brooklyn. And oral tradition recounts the founding of this settlement as a freedom village. It was an attempt at essentially self-determination by former slaves and free African Americans.
Wow.
And it also went hand in hand with the development and platting of a town in 1837 by several white landowners who were sort of plugging into this great speculative town platting boom that happened in 1836 and 1837 all over the country. So these two things kind of came together all at once. Brooklyn grew from its platting in 1837 as a biracial town, essentially. You had white and black neighbors living next to each other, although there was some segregation in different parts of town. In the late 19th century, when African American men were allowed to vote, basically the Constitution was amended, granting them the right to vote. This empowered the black majority of the town. By then it was a majority. And they then elected essentially an African American city council, and that rapidly transformed the town by about the turn of the 20th century into an all-black town. But it was incorporated, I believe,
July 30th, 1873.
Yeah, 1873, July 30th.
July. Wow.
And that gives it the distinction as the oldest incorporated black community. Many people also say that Brooklyn, going back to its founding, is America's oldest black town. And in fact, Brooklyn is essentially the only 19th century town that remains today as a community in the entire country.
Really?
So it's a bit of a
unique
historical anomaly that it has survived to the present day.
What sorts of things have you been finding in these digs? As you've been progressing with this, what kinds of artifacts are you? I'm sure you're finding houses and things, but tell us what you
Right. Just to give you a little flavor of what we've done so far. Back in 2008, we went in Upper Brooklyn, the area where we thought the earliest settlers would have been. And I went with Mayor O'Bannon, and we went from house to house, and we asked people their permission to dig in their backyards. And everybody was very interested and very cooperative, and they allowed us to basically kind of mess up their backyards a little bit. We dug little shovel holes about every 15 feet or so, trying to basically sample some of the original topsoil that might have artifacts in it that would relate to those early settlers. And for the first week or so, we were not really finding anything early. It was only about 50 to 100 years old. About a week into it, we started to find little pieces of things like teacups and saucers that were made in England, very popular all over the United States at the time. We could date them to about somewhere around 1830 or 1840 or so. And we knew in one spot that we had probably part of this early settlement.
Wow. How deep were you when you were digging there?
How
deeply had you?
We had to actually dig with post hole diggers. We couldn't even dig with shovels because so much fill has been brought into the town to keep it from flooding when it rains.
Yeah.
That we had to go about 1.5 feet, 2 feet down before we hit the original topsoil. So some of our holes were actually very deep, and
Wow.
we were sampling just a very, very small amount of the topsoil. In one spot, though, where we found these early artifacts, we were lucky enough. We decided to dig a couple of what are called test units, which are about 3 feet on a side, little squares. Mm-hmm. And in one of those, we found the corner of what we think is something like a root cellar. And we dug that, and we found some more artifacts in there, like part of a medicine vial and some window glass, and things that we would typically expect to find at an early 19th century house.
Wow. So how did your friends and neighbors, Mr. Mayor, how did they respond to this? Was there excitement in this?
There was very much excitement.
I would think.
And like I said earlier, they were very cooperative in wanting to know. And we had some individual what he wanted to, I think he wanted to get something out of it. He wanted to keep it.
Make a little on the side.
He wanted to keep it. So we told him, no, we can't let you keep it. You know, show them the historical people going to, place it in the right place for people to come and see.
Yeah, because it's something we all own. In a real sense, we as a civilization, and that's interesting. That how that, a little, well, for a price you can dig in my backyard, right? How hard was it to talk your neighbors into letting these folks run around with shovels in their backyard?
It wasn't hard at all.
Good.
Everyone was cooperative in every aspect that they could be.
That's great.
They really wanted to know.
Well, I'm sure they did.
They really wanted to know. Now,
as time went on, I watched part of the video regarding this. By the way, just for our listeners, if you go to ISAS, which stands for Illinois State Archaeological Survey, then isas.illinois.edu, you can just search for Brooklyn, Illinois, and you'll pull up the page on this. And this also links you to a video. And on the video, one of the ladies was discussing that after this kind of got rolling a little bit, there was a bit of resistance from some folks. Can you explain on that?
Well, we did have some resistance from some people who really didn't understand the significance of what was taking place. They were in the mindset of thinking that someone wanted to come in and just take over the community. And that's the way that was their thoughts. And we had to explain it to them that they're not here, and we're not here to take anything from our own community. Mm-hmm. And if anything, when Joe and them come into play and everything, they really helped out the community as a whole.
Indeed.
There were jobs that opened up for individuals as well.
Yeah.
So they were rejecting in the beginning because they didn't understand.
But once they got the idea of this was really something that was going to raise everything.
Yeah, things start changing.
Now, how far have the digs progressed, and how much farther do you think it might go?
At this point, we really haven't done a lot of work since 2008. We do plan to return this summer and do some more testing work. The reason we're doing the digs really is goal-driven. The involvement that ISAS, or the University of Illinois, has in this project is not for our own benefit. It's really to benefit the community as a public engagement project. And so the Historical Society and the community in general is in the driver's seat, and their goal, ultimate goal, is to get Brooklyn listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Because there's no existing architecture that would put the town on the National Register, we're going an alternate route, which is to find archaeological deposits that will say this town is significant from an archaeological perspective. Yes. There's an unwritten history of what happened here that still remains in the ground. So we're going to dig just as much as we need to gather enough information to say to the state that this is significant and that the town belongs on the National Register. So
yes,
I don't
absolutely.
think we have a very big program of excavations at this point, just enough to try to get it listed.
Sure. And there, like you said, you're finding more artifacts really than buildings per se, at least at the moment.
Right. The remnants of buildings from the 19th century typically are things that were underneath the buildings. So if there was an outhouse, we'll find the vault or the hole that was underneath the outhouse rather than the wooden outhouse itself.
Sure.
So those are the things that we look for, the root cellars, the outhouse vaults, and then we dig in those to recover more artifacts.
Fascinating work. And you think that I would imagine it's a pretty good chance you'll be on that the national registry.
I do believe that there are enough deposits in the town and that they have enough integrity to list the town. It's just a matter of being able to get to that point. So far, the work that we've done has essentially been on a volunteer basis, and there hasn't been a lot of institutional money behind this. This has largely been something that we've been doing on our own. Miranda has spent, for example, countless hours in libraries on the weekends and evenings, building up all this historical documentation. Some of the work we've done has been on the weekends. So we've been kind of slow going, and but we are hoping that in the near future, this summer in particular, that we'll get at least enough information to be able to reach that point.
Is it possible to take? Are you thinking of taking a class there to help dig as well, or is that's not?
That could be something that might be explored in the future. We've got a number of options for expanding work if it were to come to that point. But that's just something that is a sort of a possibility out there, but not part of our current plans.
Yeah, I would think if I were studying archaeology, I would be just dying to be digging in the mud, and going for it. Get in there, get your hands dirty. Miranda, I'm going to turn to you and ask you a couple of things, which the first one is, when you have gone all through all this research and so forth down at the library, has there also been any writing down of some of the things that were oral tradition through the families and this sort of thing?
That's something that we started doing last year. Where we hope to continue this, but instead of doing the normal Juneteenth celebrations, we had a family history day at the school in Brooklyn, and
Neat.
we had residents come in and bring photographs and yearbooks, tell us tales about the town, talk about growing up.
Fabulous.
The Harlem Club that was there, and all the celebrities that used to come through Brooklyn. They would come to the school and perform for the children, and
that's great.
It was an amazing town, and it was just so great to be able to document the people's lives and to really hear them talking about the town with such fondness. And
and of course that oral tradition is so rich, and we see so much of that in music through spirituals and that sort of thing that were handed down from one person to another. And it wasn't until the late 1800s before people started writing down these beautiful, beautiful melodies. So I'm just sort of transferring that into what you're doing here, the wonderful tales and the stories and all. And of course, you probably had a few people, elderly people, who remembered some of the.
We do. George Mcshane, he's kind of known as the unofficial historian of Brooklyn. He knows everything about the town, and he he grew up in the town, and he remembers a lot of the stories that he overheard as he's a child, and he's one who's really fought for this too, and fought for the recognition for the town. He's a wonderful man, and you just learn so much from him. And
is there any particular story that comes to mind that just kind of bowled you over?
Well, just all of them, just about how well people were treated, outsiders. He talked about how anyone, strangers, people coming through town, they never had to worry about finding a place to stay or, getting food, how welcoming the town was to anyone, and how it was really a community, and everyone knew who everyone was. Everyone helped raise everyone else's children, and
a
he
true
would talk
community. What do you think?
Exactly,
Huh?
about how he had to be good everywhere because it would get back.
Because Mrs. Jones would rat you out. Yeah.
So it was really just a picture perfect town, the way it sounds.
Well, now, Mr. Mayor, what do you feel about that? I'm sure you really are proud about what we're saying about your town, but also, the fact it really was a true community.
Yes, it was. Family orientated. And like you say, that if you went around the corner, somebody else would see you and you'd be in trouble all the way up to my time. So they carried that stick for a long time. That baton was passed off from them all the way up to us. And it's a wonderful town. My grandmother, Manila Dale, lived to be 108.
My word.
I wish they could have been there before. She passed away in 2005, I think it was. And I know they could have heard a lot of stories from her.
I imagine so.
And,
that's something we in the American society tend to forget, is that wealth of knowledge that those who've been around before us possess. It's part of who they are, Now, you mentioned a word here a minute ago, Juneteenth. And Mr. Mayor, tell us about Juneteenth, because that's a kind of neat thing.
Juneteenth was a day of freedom for slavery, and it was celebrated more so, I think, in the South, and it wasn't too much celebrated in the North. So Roberta and I assume Joe and them had got together and spoke about it, and they had the Juneteenth celebration in Brooklyn for the Freedom Walk that we established. We went across the McKinley Bridge, the Mississippi River, and we had a lot of individuals that stay in the community and those that did not stay, the natives of Brooklyn, and we all walked across the bridge back to Brooklyn in representing the ideal of the slaves coming across on the other side of Illinois. Wow.
What a wonderful tribute and memory that is, and what a wonderful way to honor that history. Mm-hmm. Do you feel different now, knowing from the fact that they've uncovered all this fabulous, interesting information, and history? Did it make you feel differently? Do you do? How so?
I felt very great about it, because it just touched my heart and in my spirit. That it's just a wonderful idea to have grown up in a community and in the beginning not knowing that it was the oldest black incorporated. And I was very excited about it when I became mayor, and I was excited that when Joe and my Roberta, my cousin, and they led the way on it, and I said, well, I'm going back to sit down and try to be mayor. You all do what you all do best, and they have done a wonderful job up until the day.
Up until today. Now there's an accountability here now, guys. Well, I want to thank all three of you having been here. Nathaniel O'Bannon III,
yes,
Mr. Mayor of Brooklyn, Illinois, and finally said, okay, I've had enough in November of 2012. And then we also have Miranda Yancey-Bailey from ISAS at University of Illinois, the Illinois State Archaeological Survey. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, a delight. And our friend Joe Galloy, who's on a repeat trip here, also with the Illinois State Archaeological Survey. Dr. Joe Galloy, thank you. And you're the one who's sort of taken point on this whole thing, aren't you?
In a way. It really is a group effort, though.
It's a group.
But it's a pleasure to be here again, Kathy.
I thank all three of you for having been here and for telling our wonderful audience about all the exciting things that are going on in Brooklyn, Illinois. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.